Everything that you have experienced or read about or seen in the last 6 months is 1 unit of change. And I'm going to use that. So just think about that, 1 unit of change. We're going to be more than doubling that over the next 12 months. And as we move into 2020, it's going to then amplify once more up to around the peak at 2021. At this point, our lives are going to be very different.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output. But very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the Grand Solar Minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
And I do welcome you this morning. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on the planet. Coming at you live from Zadar, Croatia on the Dalmatian coast. I'm out here traveling, working as well, checking out different free energy devices from Nikola Tesla's laboratory, some gravitational vortex power from another inventor, Schlauberger, but they've improved on that here in Croatia. As well, the different patents and designs for water-driven power. So anybody in a local area with at least 1 to 2 meters of cubic meters, that is, of stream flow, can produce power. So when they're talking about the new Green Deal, which we're going to cover today in the United States to convert all of America's power needs into 100% renewables, that's more kowtowing back to the corporations again instead of real movement forward with free power generation for what our society needs to transition into indoor farming. Geoengineering program now live, or supposedly set to be live next month from Harvard. Yes, that's right. It's no longer conspiracy theory. Harvard has a geoengineering program that they're unveiling and starting 2019. Plus today I wanted to run through and give a forecast of the uptick in weather events that you can expect in 2019. Again, when our atmosphere is on the change, on the move, amplification and increases as we roll into 2019. Now here's what's happening in earnest across most institutions, government bodies, and planners of disaster management. They all understand the cold's coming. They all understand the cold's here. Now they're trying to deal with it. So the first mitigation, or the first way they're going to deal with it, is they're going to come out using institutions such as Harvard in the beginning to say they're starting geoengineering programs to cool the earth. Calcium carbonate is the first planned substance, if you will, for the Harvard engineers to come up and spray into the sky. Now, we all see the streaks across the sky that are these persistent contrails that lay up there and forever and ever and ever turn into cirrus clouds at higher altitudes. The views range from it's just natural contrails up there because it's so cold. But if you're older than, say, 40, 50 years old, you know you've never seen those as a kid, ever. Others say it's cosmic radiation, and the galactic cosmic rays are ionizing the atmosphere at such a rate that now when contrails go through this ionized atmosphere, more highly charged atmosphere that we have, it leaves the trails that you can actually see, and they're forming like it would in a cloud chamber. And then the third is now the geoengineering publicly available program from Harvard. It's called Scope X. I wanted to dive into Scope X a little bit because this is the masking event that they're going to use as 2019 unfurls the nastiness of the weather. And when I say nastiness, Everything that you have experienced or read about or seen in the last 6 months is 1 unit of change. And I'm going to use that. So just think about that, 1 unit of change. We're going to be more than doubling that over the next 12 months. And as we move into 2020, it's going to then amplify once more up to around the peak at 2021. At this point, our lives are going to be very different. You can see the collapsing economy already. And as I said unequivocally from the very beginning of my channel, it's going to be a chessboard move type of control mechanism as these temperatures decrease. As the food prices increase due to never-ending crop losses, there would be a couple things that would happen to limit your ability to move across the planet. Because you're not the only one thinking, well, if it gets too cold up in Canada, or if it gets too cold in Europe, or if it's too whatever where I live, I might just move to a better location on the planet. Now you have to realize billions of people are thinking the exact same thing. So there's already been talk of, at the higher levels of the economy planning crew, and I'll leave it at that, that they're going to crash the economy on purpose. In the beginning, it'll look like it's a normal event. Some kind of, black swan will trigger something like it did in 2008 and 9, such as Lehman Brothers, the run-up in commodities prices. But this one's going to be permanent, and it's going to be nasty, and it's going to be a complete wipeout to actually literally wipe out the money supply on the planet so people cannot relocate. There's been zones that have been set up already in advance for this in equatorial band countries. Now they're operating functionally right now. They can bring new areas online to grow food. But if hundreds of millions of people move into these new zones that are already set, that's going to upset the balance that was down there. It might even trigger something on a civil war chaos level, and that would be not conducive for anybody, including the power elite that have already set these areas of walking gardens for miles and square miles, and habitation zones that have been set aside with no humans allowed to live in these areas are production centers for food on a level that is beyond imagination, where they have 100 square miles of literally walk-through gardens set aside in islands in Indonesia. They're not going to let you go there and upset the balance if they're putting things in play. What do you think's happening down across? Just look across, draw a line across the equator and go about maybe 5 to 7 degrees north or south of that line. And these are the areas that are set up for new food grow. Now, will you be privy to that food? Highly unlikely. Will they want you there disrupting? Highly probable. They will not let you get down there. So let's take a look here at Harvard, what they're going to do. Now, if you're listening for the first time and you've never heard of geoengineering, it's all about cloud seeding to then create clouds. And then when these clouds form, they reflect sunlight back to space to try to reduce this hypothetical global warming thing that we have going on. Cloud brightening project is another one that we could take a look at. The Harvard Geoengineering program, it's called the Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment. They talk about using a fleet of aircraft to deposit calcium carbonate, because it's a white reflective surface, into the atmosphere. Multiple ways they're going to try this. They're going to use tether balloons, fleets of aircraft, and then also the Marine Brightening Project, where they basically have large barges and it looks like a bunch of chimneys on barges that then inject microparticles of salt water into the atmosphere to create fog clouds so the sun rays don't bounce and absorb into the ocean. They just supposedly bounce off these fog layers that are formed by the Marine Brightening Project barges, and no heat is absorbed into the ocean. So what you want to do is go to the geoengineering.environment.harvard.edu site. This is public knowledge now, and it's the first way that they're going to try to deflect all the changes that are coming through the next 2 years. They're going to try to take credit for cooling the planet when it does cool. That's a given. The whole thing for me was, and I've even done 2 videos on this, and I've even called them out for them just using computer models to simulate what these clouds are going to do in terms of temperature and reflectivity off the oceans for sun rays. We've seen the enormous amount of uptick in volcanoes. This is going to continue. absolutely going to continue because there's 100% correlation, connection, relationship, if you will, from grand solar minimums and increase in volcanic activity. They go hand in hand. So when we see that Indonesia just had a major eruption and multiple volcanoes across the planet beginning to erupt, the earthquakes, drop off in solar activity, likely blamed for the global uptick, I'm going to say. And these types of events are going to continue. So in the videos, what I was trying to do, if Harvard is up there spraying, I was asking the question, how long before the particulates completely exit the atmosphere? So let's say they spray up 100 tons of calcium carbonate today. My question was, how long will that take for the gravity of our Earth to take effect, wind patterns, etc., for that to completely fall out of the sky? Because can you imagine if they're up there spraying and they've already lowered the temperature like 0.5 degrees Celsius on the planet, and suddenly we have a major volcanic eruption? Because we know volcanic eruptions lower the planet's temperature. Year without a summer, Tambora is a very good example. So what's going to happen if Harvard's live program is spraying and then we get a VEI-7 eruption? Well, the VEI-7 would cool the planet anyway 1.5 degrees or more, like we saw with Tambora, 1815, 1816, 1817. Go back and look how much the Earth's temperatures cooled in those years, just from the Tambora eruption alone. Now, if Harvard's up there live with their program and they've already lowered the temperatures 5 or 0.5 degree or 0.6 of a degree, how is this going to couple together? I'm sure they didn't run that in their models. That is an extinction level event. Our agriculture will go to almost zero within a full year, and we will not have any food production globally for at least 2 years, at the minimum, if there's a VEI-7 and they already have a geoengineering program live and the particulates are in the atmosphere. And they don't even know what's going to happen with the particulates that are up there that have some kind of binding effect or amplification effect of the regular sulfur dioxide particulates that are coming out of these eruptions. And plan on it, bank on it. You better have an emergency plan just for the eruption alone. Every single grand solar minimum, 100% of them, all of them, have these eruptions associated with it. 6s and 7s on the VEI is guaranteed coming. When we're entering into this grand solar minimum, we're at the cusp right now, we're entering in. This in 2019 is going to shake your foundation of what you consider reality to be on how extreme the weather is going to become. And then you have to put this in perspective. As extreme as you think it is, and the world is falling apart and it's so chaotic and this is the end of the world, it's not, because 2020 is going to be so much more intense than 2019. So the expectation is a major volcanic eruption during these next 2 years, to the point that it's going to reduce food production anyway from just blocking out the sun with all the aerosols. Because the first peak on the magnetic canceling waves on the sun that Valentina Zarkova and her team have done peak out at 2021. Once we get to the 2021 era, 2020, or getting into, the first quarter, say, of 2021, this is the danger zone of these large volcanic eruptions coming. If that happens, you really need to go get food from the store, because your food supply is going to run out. Your, everybody's food supply will be dwindling because they just won't be able to grow it naturally. Everything's a month or month and a half late planting. It's too wet, it's too cold. Now, can you imagine coupling a VEI-7 eruption with all the sun-blocking particulates on top of the chaos that's happening now with our industrial agriculture systems globally? There's no way we could cope, period, no way. If you see a VEI-7 eruption happening, you drop everything you're doing, you quit your job, you do whatever you need to do to get to the store that minute, that hour to get food. And I'm talking long-term food storage, hard, dried bulk foods, canned goods. That kind of food is what you're going to need. And for them to be up there spraying in the atmosphere to try to take credit for the cooling is just downright dangerous. Harvard, I do not approve, I do not consent, and nor should anybody else listening.
And since I have been talking about our need moving forward in this new society that we're entering as our global grain production starts to be reduced in yield, your food prices are going to skyrocket. And I mean skyrocket, not just doubling or tripling, something like 5 or 10 times higher by 2020 at the very least. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. They've been around since 1974, heirloom and organic seeds. Since I've started talking about them in my videos, I have a lot of people write and say that they've previously ordered, that they know the owner, having great results, good customer service. They quite enjoyed the seed quality as well. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. And we know the benefits of microgreens. All you have to do is use a search engine and look up vitamin, mineral, nutrient content of microgreens. You'll be shocked. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. And not only that, they have wheatgrass and grain seeds. So when I'm talking about grain growing regions going offline, we just need to look back in history and see where across the planet there was difficulty growing grains when this grand solar minimum intensified and the jet stream started wandering just like they're doing today, due to a decreased magnetosphere that does not hold our jet streams locked in their traditional flows. Grains are one thing, herb seeds are another, cover crops, something different, but whatever you do, organic seeds are going to be a necessity because you can save those seeds and then grow them the next season, which you unequivocally cannot do with GMO. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
You're trying to use models out there, David Keith. You're trying to use models to run what's going to simulate the atmosphere. We know the models haven't worked with the IPCC. Look how far off the models are in the IPCC. They ran 98 different models and only one out of the 98 is even close to today's global temperatures. Everything else is super far above. And anywhere from a half a degree up to 3.5, 4 degrees Celsius above what the actual temperatures are. That was models. Models don't work. All this global tax is based on models that are not working. And now Harvard wants to come out with models to show what's going to happen when they spray the atmosphere and how the cloud patterns are going to change, how the precipitation patterns are going to change, where the droughts are going to form, where it's going to have heavier rain with models. I don't think they took into consideration the volcanic explosivity index when they have planned out this program. I feel it's incredibly dangerous at this time. Now, one of the reasons I'm actually traveling is I've been invited out here. Thank you so much for my guests to allow me to stay in their, shall we say, plush accommodations, as well as the information given to me and the farms and the farmers I was taken to talk about the changes. Now, the farmers here understand that there's something going on, and it started 2 years ago. Now, this is Croatia specific, but it also would have to do with Belarus, where was else? Slovenia, and the Ukraine are all experiencing the exact same weather phenomenon. So these 4 countries here in Eastern Europe and the Balkans as well. So if you go over to Montenegro next door, if you go over to Bosnia or something, this exact same weather pattern are happening. There's been a shift in the jet stream that is locked in place here. Now the weather anomalies that the farmers are reporting, it is incredible. 2 kilometers away, they can still grow the olives and everything's fine. You go 2 kilometers more north to the west and it's completely dry and they can't grow anymore. It's literally a perfect line between where you can grow and where you cannot. Also, what has changed in the last 2 years, there's much more moisture in the atmosphere. Everybody across the board has talked about the summers used to be hot, but they would be dry hot, so they weren't too bad. But now it is wet, humidity, muggy hot. So they're even saying it's turning into an equatorial tropical climate during the summer. But in the winter, it's also the inverse. Used to be more dry, cooler winters, but dry cold. But now it's like go to the bottom of your bones, into the center of your marrow, kind of super cold, wet cold. They just never experienced this before. So across the board, everybody we're talking to when we go visit farms, they're having more difficulty growing. The seasons are out of flux by at least 1 month here in Croatia. And again, Ukraine is experiencing the same thing. Belarus is experiencing the same thing, and Slovenia. Everything is out of kilter here by 1 month, and there's more humidity in the air. Also, the drought conditions. It had only rained 3 days for the entire last month, which is not normal for here. At this time of the year, they're supposed to be getting rain. There's supposed to be at least 1 to 2 days of rain per week in fronts that would normally roll through, and a nice steady kind of a rain that gets the ground wet, keeps some moisture in there, and then the plants and especially the fruit orchards and olives that are still able to grow because the temperatures don't get that cold. That moisture pattern's gone. It's unreliable, and they don't know what's happening to the weather. So I had a chance to sit down and talk with some farmers and explain about the effects from the sun and the magnetism, and I had a couple other people with me that understand fully that realm and can translate those types of professional words into plasma streams, Birkeland currents, Tesla, magnetic motors, free energy devices, vortices. And once the farmers understood what was happening, they quickly asked, well, how long is it, what's the cycle on this? What's the duration of the cycle? Because you have to realize that in Croatia, I'm sitting across from a town that the walls are 2,000 years old. We're also visiting some historians and museums to look at the weather records as well. I've had a chance to sit down. In 1790, had a major quake in Rijeka, which is just on the beginning of the Dalmatian coast up near Istria, off the peninsula there. And Rijeka had a quake that devastated the entire city back in 1790. That was at the end of the Little Ice Age. Just getting into the Dalton Minimum, because they officially flagged the Dalton Minimum starting around 1795, 1798, and then it intensified through 1810 and right into the year without a summer. So the quake that rocked Rijeka and decimated that, it looks like Rijeka on the map if you're taking a look. It's right where the Aegean comes in, turns into the U at the top of the Aegean Sea here. Between Italy and Croatia, you'll find that part Rijeka. The J sound has a Y sound here in the language. Also, the climatic events that were leading up to that 1790 massive quake, people noticed that the weather was off for like 3 or 4 years specifically. They had a couple lithographs where the farmers were just standing there looking at the sky because all the rains had stopped again, the same kind of pattern happening. So they're starting to put 2 and 2 together, that these revolving cycles here are affecting them, and they can map them out so they know what's happening. Now, part of it also is a few of the farmers have the blinders on where they just go, we didn't grow any olives this year. And they don't ask or they don't care about next year. They're just worried about today's lunch on the table because they couldn't grow any olives. But then you have a whole other subset of farmers and plantation owners that are asking, all right, where's the weather going next year? The museums here are chock-a-block full of lithographs, more historical recordings of what has happened in the past climatically going back 2,000 years. The churches of all places, the cathedrals, the libraries in these churches are outstanding. Now, you got to go back there with somebody. They have gloves, they turn the pages for you, and they try to translate some of the text. There's been several different renditions all the way from Greek to Roman to Croatian. The languages of the traders, the movement, but they still have these records going back 2,000 years in climate. That's another reason I'm here, to go with a historian and look through some of these archives and try to take some images. A lot of the places are like, you can't even take a photo of this page. No flash. And I'm like, wait, no flash, how's it going to hurt the pages? And they're like, well, no photos. You still want to see it? The lithographs pretty much tell it all. When you go back around 15 in the 1560s and further back, the skies are dark. Every single painting that goes back prior to 1500, the skies are dark. Like everything is just dreary and And you can really see it the way the life was unfolding. They have lithographs of famines, and they can tell you in pinpoint, yeah, back in 1483, there was a massive famine here for 2 years. Nothing grew. And then they'll take you back and they'll go, well, back around 536 AD, when they were repairing this cathedral here because of an earthquake, they had a famine. The volcanic eruptions have ceased. They haven't had any volcanic eruptions here. But you see Etna going off across the Aegean. So these things go hand in hand. The volcanic eruptions and the climatic weather events and the earthquakes go hand in hand with the increasing intensification of this grand solar minimum. I was saying before, you would look for atmospheric anomalies as well. Like the winds are going to get faster because the jet streams are moving and they're colliding into new spaces where they don't normally go. Now you have to realize our atmosphere is not just the wind on your face. It goes up miles and miles and miles up there to the edge of space. Now these jet streams are in the flow between where you're looking in the sky, I'm not going to say the edge of space, but up through the stratosphere, multi-miles thick. Jet streams are moving into new bands, new places, and when they go where there's already some other wind pattern flowing there, they're riding on top, colliding with, and creating heavier wind events in these areas. So one specific thing, beyond all the floods that have occurred this year, like everything you see is a once in a 200-year event, once in a 500-year event. We got the deserts across the Middle East in full bloom from the massive flooding over the last 3 months. The deserts in North Africa, what they call the Sahel, from Somalia all the way over to Mauritania on the west coast there in the Atlantic, full-on grasslands now. These are major changes happening.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.